All right, welcome. This is my first vibe coding vlog. That's what I think I'm going to call these things. Maybe I'll change the name here at some point. And the goal of these videos is to really just kind of give you some insight into how I'm building projects and kind of give my feedback and thoughts on some of the newest tools coming out for agentic coding and kind of building AI products. This is my first video. I will introduce myself. My name is Jake. And back in February, I actually won the Google Cloud MLB hackathon and was able to present at Google Cloud Next. I'm going to drop a link below if you want to watch that video or haven't seen it. It's a pretty fun little demo I do of a baseball AI product I did where it analyzes videos of pitchers. But today what I'm going to be talking about is the newest Google Cloud hackathon I just completed, my second, which is AI in Action. And as you can see here, this was partnered with MongoDB and GitLab. I got to go to Google Cloud Next and actually meet some people from those companies. So I was pretty excited to use their tools. I also had used a little bit of Supabase and some like Postgres type products, but never anything like MongoDB. And I think it's a really interesting tool to build agents with and like kind of lightweight products like I'm going to show you today. So I was super excited to jump in and try that out. Just a little bit about my background as a coder. I had never written my own code probably prior to like last November. I took Foundations of Cloud certification from Amazon and then got an AI practitioner certification also from Amazon. And then after that, just started kind of vibe coding, like just prompting Claude and seeing what I could make like little games. And then after that, in February, I actually got Cursor and started to kind of build repos and like learn about best practices for like architecting code. And so I'm still pretty new at this. I have since then, I was going to maybe even interview for Google. So I did a lot of Python classes via NeetCode and did some like LeetCode easy level problems, even got up to medium. So I'm starting to understand like the foundations of like writing decent like object oriented code, but I still vibe code a lot. Like full disclosure, like this project, probably 95% of it was written with Claude and Cursor. So the code's not perfect. It can be a little messy, but for hackathons like this, I think the main thing is to not stress the little details and more so think about just big picture. Is this idea valid? And just put something out there using these new exciting like APIs and products. So without further ado, let's jump into this project that I did. A lot of people ask me how I generate my idea. So for this project in particular, this is a tool I use a lot. It's called the NBA Trade Machine. My friend Chutch had told me about it, and it's by ESPN, and it's where you can kind of like simulate fake trades for NBA teams and like pretend you're the GM. And then it will tell you if the trade works under the CBA, like the laws that govern the NBA, as well as give you some like projections potentially. It's okay, but you can see it's like certainly a little outdated in today's time. Certainly the UI is, and then I even think the logic's a little bit like static. So my idea was to kind of like update this for my project. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of walk you through how I did that in my code base. So for my code base, I do use Cursor. And this is my first time using Cursor 1.0 for a project. I think it launched in May. And this project, I started this project in May, or at least that's when I like started to have time not doing LeetCode problems anymore. So I was really happy with Cursor 1.0. I was able to do for the first time a client server architecture setup, which I was really happy about. I learned all about like why that's best practice and for security and for networking. And then by this point, I've gotten pretty good at like Docker files and doing cloud runs. So I was able to use that again as well, which was great. I also, of course, have a bunch of cloud credits from winning that Google hackathon. So I was able to largely do this using the Gemini model as like kind of the powerhouse for the app. But then when I would code, I would largely use Claude 4.0 because I still think it's just slightly better. So how do I use Cursor? I guess I'll kind of talk through that a little bit. One thing I'd like to do this project was use the Cursor rules functionality. And with Cursor rules, I was able to kind of make like a project management document and just dump it in here. And I did this with the help of obviously Google AI Studio and Gemini. I later learned that you're probably not supposed to do this level of detail with Cursor rules. I think that the context might be a little bit too big. They want it kind of 500 lines max. I think this is a bit under. But at times I did find my agent in Cursor not understanding this document, or like, for example, it would even try and update it. Like you could see that there's like a conflict here where like I originally wrote we're using 2.5 Flash, whatever the newest stated model is, and then like it kind of switches to this, and then sometimes it even would put Google AI as like the model that we would be using like in the code. So it still struggles, I think, when you have like these larger documents to like really understand it. I think I could have broken this up a little better, like kind of like maybe had one like rule that talks about like schema structure, one rule that was like project overview, and then like what I've liked to do now is like these little quick and dirty rules, which was like it kept bugging me because it can't view your env file, which is like where your like secrets are managed. So I made like a little rule that's just like, assume my env file is configured correctly, you can ask me questions about it, but like it would keep trying to generate env files, like thinking that I didn't have one. So this was like I think quick and dirty rules like this are nice. I've been using always just because I don't see the downside. Maybe it's like costing me more tokens, but you pay for like events like when you use the tool, so I'm not even sure what the downside of doing always is. It could like kind of deteriorate the code, I guess, if it has to consider this entire block of text every time it's generating code. It makes it probably less efficient. Again, you will eventually hit like a point where there's diminishing returns on all that context, but I liked always. I probably for my next project will experiment a little bit with auto attached and making these rules a little bit tighter, but in general, I really liked the ability to do this. I still have some issues with like versioning control, making sure it's using like the right version of Node.js and the right version of, Gemini and all that good stuff. But, in general, this did help it like kind of keep the context and constantly understand the project, even though it would sometimes get a little bit off base. It wasn't doing those massive rewrites or just totally going off base, like if you were to like use Cursor out of the box and do a bad prompt to it. So that's Cursor rules. That was a really nice feature. It's 1.0. To add a new one, all you have to do, by the way, is just like, there's a lot of ways to do it. I think you can even do it in chat. You can like attach and go to rules, and then you can like make a new one right here. There's a few ways to do it, but yeah, this is like a quick and easy way. Another thing that I started to experiment with this like version of Cursor was like the web plugin. Now, I'm not exactly sure if you need this. Like, I think with Gemini 2.5 Pro, it like base has the ability to like do a function call to the web. I also know that people are now using like Playwright to like do, which is like an MCP, which we'll talk about in a second, to like get their models connected to web data. But what I would do specifically is just like have web turned on and then like copy paste like a domain in here and be like, read this and let's copy its structure. And that seemed to work well. Now, I'm not sure I even needed to put this web thing in here. Maybe if I just put, whatever the domain was and say read this and copy, it would already be able to do that depending on the model. But I did appreciate that tool. Another thing that I kind of liked was I was getting a lot of linter errors, but I'm not even sure what this button does for it. I think it kind of just like auto retries to fix them. But was I started using like the Git manager in here. Now, I also have now connected my GitHub with it. Now, I'll let you know, like a week ago when I was working on this button wasn't here, this integrations button. So I felt at times I would have to keep like logging in, authenticating like my Google Cloud and my GitHub throughout the project. So I'm hoping that this makes it like where like BugBot and some of these background agent tools that weren't working for me for this project will work during the next project. So that's something that I'm really excited about. It's just like, I'm not a fan of GitHub personally. My friends like kind of made fun of me. Like that was actually one of my biggest hesitations to learning to code like 2 years ago when I was like trying to make custom OpenAI agents. It was like, I just hate using GitHub. Like it feels like so not made for normal people and there was like just so much functionality now from years of existing that if you're just like trying to write basic code or just like read someone else's like code base, it could even be like, I feel like daunting for a beginner. So anyways, managing my pushes, managing my continuous deployment and like bug inspection, all that good stuff. Like great, take that off my hand. That's not something I enjoy doing. I'm like more creative. I like, enjoy designing the front end and the architecture of this. So cool. Slack, I don't, use Slack. I'm unemployed right now. So maybe one day. So, these are just like some of the Cursor features I've really been enjoying as I kind of get to know it better. And I feel like saved me a lot of time. I've also spent less time adding files. Like I feel like when I started using Cursor back in February or January, I would constantly have to like tell it which file to read, but I think it's getting way better at like kind of parsing up your code base and like grepping it and like using keywords. And I think also that's due to the fact that when you write your code with AI, it does a lot of notation for itself, like create a dark theme. So if you're like, where's my dark theme, it can kind of just grab dark theme. So and that's great. Like I don't have to write those notes in the code anymore. Another thing that I kind of want to talk a lot about with Cursor this video is this new MCP feature they came out with. So you can see this MongoDB one I have set up. I blanked my key just because this is gonna be on YouTube and I didn't want you guys to see that. But basically I had this running for a little bit during my project, and what this let me do was essentially I could just copy and paste like into my directory. Like I could just go into like the file that this was hosted in, drop in like something from Kaggle, like this MBA stat sheet, and I could say just like add this to my MongoDB database using the schema from rules, and it would just work. And I thought that was super cool. And in fact, I could even like talk to the agent and be like, what are Jason Tatum's stats in our MongoDB database? And if I have this MCP set up, it would actually just work. So I was a little bit confused about what MCPs actually were. And in fact, I even installed the extension in Cursor for MongoDB, thinking I would need both. Now, I started to see like a little bit redundancy here. Like I know this lets you like access and edit documents, but for me and someone who's like vibe coding a lot, I think that you're better off just setting up the MCP and basically letting the agent use MongoDB for you instead of having to like manage your own MongoDB stuff. Now, obviously this is nice if like the agent starts messing up or gets confused that you can access it here as well. But I do wonder if there's gonna be a consolidation between extensions and MCPs at some point. As agents write more code and use the tools more often for you, and you just kind of want to like natural language use it in chat instead of like actually like using it in VS Code. So that was like fun. I'd like never used MongoDB like I told you, so like just learning about how you can use it in this like VS Code type situation was nice. One thing I do want to tell you about MongoDB though, and this MCP that I wrote, is first of all, I couldn't add a second MCP. Like once I added this, I was kind of stuck. So I don't know how many custom MCPs you can add here, or like what I'm doing wrong. Like I hit the pencil icon, that should do edit. But then when I hit like plus, it's doing the same thing. So I don't know if you can run multiple MCPs yet. I also could not get these background agents to work, but I'm going to do a second hackathon for Google called Agent Development Kit. And I will try this again now that this button's here. Hopefully it works now. So the one thing I did want to talk about is, other than like running MCPs in Cursor, because this actually did work. Like once I had this set up, I was able to like use Cursor agent to access and like do edits to my database and like drop data in and all that good stuff, which was great, without having to write a script to do that. So one thing I did want to write about though is when I tried to connect my app to this MCP, it failed. So the reason for that being, and we're going to actually go back now into my browser, is when I was using my app, which, oh no, I don't have it. Here it is. So when I'm using my app, and for example, I do something like tell me about the Celtics, what's happening is first Gemini Flash 2.5 is classifying this. Like that's the first thing that's happening. And it's saying that this is a person asking us about a team. Then what it's doing is after that classification, it's actually going to our MCP server and it's learning like what to do. Like what API calls should I be doing? Like what, when I get information back from the database, how do I format that information for like my reply? What is this data that I'm reading? And that's great. But what you set up in Cursor here is an MCP for LLM. So it's what it's doing, like what you're running in Cursor, like this little line of code I showed you earlier saying Cursor, that's just letting your Cursor agent know how to use MongoDB. It's not actually like telling it, like you can't just connect your HTTP app to this and expect your app to know how to use it. That's what I was running into because I couldn't deploy to Docker, I couldn't deploy to the web. So I actually had to make my own custom MCP. And again, I wouldn't have known how to do this on my own. I just Googled about a lot and I found a good repository of like people that made their own custom MCPs. And then I fed that information to Claude, and then it kind of helped me through once I told it the logic. And this is kind of like the secret sauce. Like more than anything else, like my app is pretty basic, as you can see. It's just like a chat. But the reason it's able to like make these calls is, one, MongoDB has all this data sig in it, and that's like indexed nicely. But two, the MCP is actually telling the model how to use that data. So you're going to get a really high level of accuracy and be able to do things like find players similar salaries, which is like requires a query, right, to the database. So that was something I had to like really spend like days on doing, which was like, oh, you can't just use these. Like, it's great. Every company now is advertising MCPs, but those are just like more designed for agent and like cursor type situations. And Claude, it's not really designed for your app to use. And I'll star this. Maybe I should push it, tell them about mine. I don't know if they'd be interested. But anyways, that's something interesting to know. Another thing that I think was kind of cool to like learn about throughout this project was just using MongoDB. For people that don't use it, I don't know if this is an enterprise grade tool. They say it is. I know my friends that work like at larger companies have issues with it just because like the schema starts to break down at like scale and like, but if you're doing like a small project or running a startup, I would use it because first of all, you can get started for free. And second of all, it's like super simple to set up. Like you just create a project and the network access lets your applications and your like coding environments connect to this database. So it's like, it didn't take me very long at all to like get this set up. And what's really cool is, like I told you earlier, not only could Cursor go ahead and create like database documents for me. So like players was completely based on that like spreadsheet I found in Kaggle that I was showing you guys. And it just like kind of uploaded all that information. But I also was able to use AI to generate data for me. So instead of using an API or Kaggle, what I did was I actually went to Google Deep Thinking with grounding and Google search turned on. I promise you this was turned on earlier. And I would tell it basically like a project I'm working on. And it's like I created JSON for MongoDB of the latest MBA collective bargaining agreement. And then what it would do is it would actually create something here that I could literally either just drag and drop into my database, or if I'm feeling extremely lazy, I could literally just copy and paste this text into Cursor and say like dump this into the database and let Cursor handle it. And what you can see here is, this is data that I'm not sure would be necessarily particularly great in a traditional like Postgres database. It might be, but it's just kind of like long strings. And like it's like a legal document, right? But what's really cool about obviously AI, centered apps is that long strings of text are like where it thrives. And like what it wants to do is like read and like digest long strings of text, more so even than like traditional numeral data. So I was really psyched to see that how easy it was to like do something like hosting the CBA document here. And in fact, I just even wonder if this is applicable to other things like, obviously legal documents are well formatted, I think, to do stuff like this because they are like very hierarchical. But if you could even like do it for like game rule books is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. Or even something like less traditional, like maybe essays or, articles in the New York Times. Could you kind of like use AI to kind of create hierarchies like this and then kind of store it in MongoDB? So that was really cool to see it work well with big text data sets. Another thing that I was interested in was just the Teams setup. So this was something that, I also created this entire document with Gemini. And this is something that I actually regretted in hindsight, was once I really understood how my app was going to work, that it needed to quickly reference strengths and weaknesses of teams. It needed to quickly reference salaries of teams as well as salaries of players to like do all of these 4 functions I was working towards. I was able to design a document that really was set up well to handle the end use case. And in fact, I don't even think I would have used the Kaggle document in hindsight. What I should have probably done is just taken this Kaggle document and nested these like player stats right under like their position in the roster. I could have just added all their stats here and made it even more efficient. So basically all my AI would have had to do was figure out, okay, what teams are being asked about in this trade. So for example, if it's a Tatum for LeBron, I'm putting it in here, but you don't need to. Gemini's smart enough to figure that out. All we really need to do is look at that team document, and then from the Lakers team document and from the Celtics team document, probably would have everything it needs to build its response. And right now I'm actually feeding it like 2 or 3 documents, which you can see makes it take a little bit longer to load as it puts together its analysis and thinks through like who wins the trade. And I've run this query a few times, and it's always funny that the Lakers win the trade when they trade Tatum for LeBron, and the logic it comes up with is actually really interesting. It uses stats from the database and also talks about why Tatum would be better than LeBron, even though on base level, if it was just a casual fan, it might, you might be like, oh, Tatum has less points, but there's thought going into this, which is really cool. So that was what I learned about MongoDB, was really just like how to set up and use these documents. And in hindsight, what I would probably do is just really think through this front end, like UX well, like just build this out really detailed. And then once I really understand what's here, now that I understand how easy it is to like hook up and like build out a MongoDB, especially with like AI and like the ability to scrape websites and collect data for you, is just like build this later once I really understand how my agents can be accessing the data. So I hope you guys all found this interesting. I hope that my analysis of like how I use Cursor and how I use agents and how I use the MCP tools and the frustrations of building my own MCP and how that, kind of all translated into a nice dual server architecture where like API calls are happening and then, MongoDB is being accessed. Made sense. I don't think it actually, this chart's kind of crappy. Cursor made this chart, so if you're on my GitHub, I'm sorry about that. But I think that now that you understand that like MCP formats request, like API requests, and then like obviously MongoDB sits in a server as well, I hope that all makes more sense and that you're able to run this on your own if you were to do this or something similar where you needed to run an agent connected to MongoDB. So yeah, that's my first video. If you like it, like, comment, ask me questions. I like doing this. It helps me like learn and think and like kind of reflect upon projects. So I'm going to keep doing them for my personal use, but I hope this got used to someone else. All right. Have a good one.